Hello everyone, welcome to this MEF Connect webinar. The title of today's session is What does the Metaverse mean for the mobile ecosystem? And I'm Tim Green, I'm the featured editor of the MEF, and I'll be moderating today's session, in which we'll be diving into the thorny and elusive topic of the Metaverse. And I know how thorny and elusive it is because I've been writing a report for the MEF on this topic, which we're going to be publishing next month, so look out for that. And obviously this is a topic that is very much at the forefront of people's minds in the tech space and in the mobile space, especially at the moment. Any visitors to Mobile World Congress earlier this month would have known just how prevalent the topic it was, both on the stands and also in conference sessions. So anyway, I'm delighted to be joined by two members of the MEF who have been thinking a lot about this topic. One is Doug Makashima, he's the CSMO of Summertech. And then we also have Ivan Ostajic. I hope I pronounced your name correctly, Ivan. You're the Chief Business Officer of Infobip. So both of you, thank you very much for joining us today. Before we kick off, just some housekeeping. This session will go on for about 45 minutes to an hour. We are recording it, so we will have a recording available on the site and on the MEF social and YouTube channels, which you can watch again or share with any colleagues who missed it. And we encourage questions, so there's a Q&A tab at the bottom of the screen. So ask a question at any point, I'll check those questions and make sure we cover those later on in the session. So anyway, with that, I'll say I'll kick off the session and bring in our panelists. So the obvious question first, definitions. In the course of writing my report, this has proved to be quite a difficult question to wrestle with. There is an argument that we're having a metaverse session now in the sense that we're disembodied and we're interacting with each other. But also there is the question of massive multiplayer gaming. And then, of course, you know, things like what Facebook is doing with Horizon Worlds and so on. So there's a lot of activity going on. So Doug, I'll come to you first. Have you considered a good working definition of the metaverse?
Thanks, Tim. Yeah, well, I think, okay, I've got the short definition, which is it's all about the human co-experience. The long definition is it's an immersive internet experience, essentially a world of endless interconnected virtual communities where people can meet, work, play, interact, and of course shop. E-commerce is really important. I really like the definition of Roblox CEO, David Baszucki, who calls, I'll paraphrase, again, human coexistence. It's a place where technology combines high fidelity communication with a new way to tell stories. And of course, borrowing from mobile gaming and the entertainment industry, but in the metaverse, humans will interact with virtual things in a virtual space, but people will also interact with each other and real things across distances. So if you think about it, you know, this is what tele and like in e-commerce and e-meetings, you know, that's what these mean, right? So today, you know, metaverse, we talk about VR, AR, mixed reality, but the metaverse will also bridge reality across distances in a higher fidelity way.
Ivan, over to you.
Yeah, well, I mean, you start actually something that should be a you know, simple question, but turns out that it's probably one of the more difficult questions in a way, because they're kind of I think Doug mentioned there are kind of three definitions that people see. So one is the metaverse as a product or a service. The other one is metaverse as a place, and the third one is a metaverse as a moment. So I'll just go through them very quickly. So the metaverse as a product or a service, it is essentially, that's kind of the most referenced definition of metaverse, that it's an expansive network of persistent real-time rendered 3D world and simulations that can be experienced synchronously by effectively unlimited number of users, each with individual sense of presence. Now, if you kind of work out that definition, it's almost like internet with a 3D overlay on top of it, right? And the 3D overlay can be extended reality, augmented reality, virtual reality. But I mean, that's kind of one definition. The other one is really, narrow definition, which says metaverse as a place. So it's kind of a 3D place or world where you go to play a video game or where you go doing shopping. That's kind of what a lot of people, it's more narrow definition if you think about it. And the third one is one that Doug mentioned, the metaverse as a moment. It's all about human experience. So it's kind of describing the moment where our digital lives and our kind of online identities experiences become mixed with our physical experiences and become something meaningful. You can argue the third one is a bit, let's say, philosophical, but actually what I like is kind of focuses on individual experience, because indeed metaverse will enhance experience that we have versus the experience we have when we only look at video or read text. So, it's hard. I actually like number one because it's very expensive and it kind of includes the two others, because, if you have a product as a service that's continuous, it does include, experience that people have when they're there. And one subset of it are metaverse worlds in a way. So, sorry, a little bit long answer, but the question was not that easy as it seemed.
But it's interesting, it's like when I think about my definition and Ivan, your definition, we just defined the internet, right? You can use those same definitions to talk about the internet today.
It is true. That's why people say it's
the next generation, right? It's the next iteration of the internet. When we think about it, what did the internet bring us, right? Telecommunications, telecomputing, basically 2D VR, it's virtual reality, because you're not really there. You're not really touching that remote server computer or not, that other person across the Skype connection, gaming even, human interactivity, commerce, enterprise applications, right? It's all been linear 2D. And now we're talking about 3D and virtual reality, as in not just connecting people with other people, but with virtual elements in a virtual space and virtual products and commerce even, right? So yes, quite interesting.
And I mean, Doug, just to build on what you said, you could actually think about this as kind of next evolution where all these technologies will kind of merge. And sometimes it will be appropriate to use 3D overlay, as I said, or VR overlay. And in other cases, you'll just want something simple.
Exactly.
So if we run with this idea that it's the existing internet overlaid with some kind of more immersive interface on top of it, then what are those immersive interfaces? Do we need a headset? If it's just if it's some kind of graphical AR overlay, then it doesn't even necessarily need to be 3D. So there's a lot of sort of conditions there. So Ivan, back to you. What do you think? Do you think we need to restrict it in this way, or can the metaverse be me holding a phone up and seeing graphics, and can it also be me inside a virtual headset? Yeah, I mean, if you really, I like disruptive thinking. So if you really push the thinking, then there are companies which would actually think that metaverse will become some sort of brand device interface, right? And that we might not need actually the headset. I think in reality, we'll need some sort of aid. I mean, if we add that there is a 3D overlay, I think we'll need some sort of aid in foreseeable future to have the full experience, whether those are goggles or it's your phone, or your phone with like VR headset. I think to remain realistic in next number of years, let's say 5-year horizon, I think there will need to be some device to add that overlay. I mean, maybe I'm a bit conservative, but then, I mean, eventually, depends where this world and regulation and everything goes. Yeah, it is possible that you will have devices that somehow, create that experience when you close your eyes and you stimulate your brain. But, we need much more research on that. So if you ask me personally, I think in foreseeable future, we should think of, it doesn't need to be a headset, but we should think of an aid device that will help us have a full experience. What about you, Doug? What do you think?
Well, I certainly think these so-called HMDs, as head mount displays, these VR goggles, can enhance and provide a 360 experience, right? I mean, But this is one of the common misconceptions, in my view, of VR and the metaverse, is that you need this kind of special augmented device. Sure, it does enhance the experience and gives you unique experiences, especially if you want to talk about augmented reality, where you're out in the real space. You can be in a busy downtown area and you have these AR glasses on, and it gives you an overlay of information, virtual assistants, combining virtual elements with the real world. But, let me do something here. Okay, so now we're in the metaverse, right? This Zoom webinar is the metaverse, and here's my virtual element, and here's my 3D, right? So we're looking at it 2D planar as a stream, as a one-way stream today. But you can easily imagine if I had a 3D camera and a 360 camera, and you were on just your regular smartphone, you can swipe along on the screen or move the phone, and you can see the full 360 environment. In fact, our audience platform is exactly what we do. We bring a live event, the full 360 experience, into the metaverse, and any participant can then interact in that virtual space. It's a real space, but we're bringing it into the virtual world, right? So, I think certainly, hardware and software and devices and, will help augment the experience and enhance it. But today, right, I'm on my laptop with a webcam, and you can have a smartphone and experience the metaverse today. There are many games, there are many experiences that you can experience just on the mobile phone, and more users, that's how they experience the internet, right? Especially younger generation. They're not even using laptops, PCs anymore. It's all about the mobile device. And then, of course, what's really interesting now is you're seeing some of these head mount displays, these VR goggles and glasses being completely untethered. So they're not connected to the PC or laptop anymore for a VR goggle, and the glasses, they're not even tethered to your smartphone. They're cellular connected.
I wonder if when there's discussion about using headsets for this metaverse or the next generation of the internet, whatever it is, that people underestimate the physical discomfort of it and the health factors. If anyone's going to define the metaverse as something that you have to wear a headset for, then I think it's a mistake, because who wants to sit inside goggles for more than half an hour? It's just not going to happen. And I think that even extends to glasses that I just overlay the real world. I'm a bit skeptical on all that. And I know that there's some commentators who've written about Apple's vision for the future being some kind of marriage of eyewear with the, obviously the extremely successful iPods, no, what they're called, AirPods. But I'm just a bit more skeptical on that. So I don't know. What do you think about the kind of this physical element of having some third piece of kit attached to your head?
Well, I mean, if you're walking around outside, of course, it has to be like glasses, right?
Yeah.
In terms of form factor and size and weight. But if you're indoors, sitting at your workstation at work, or on the couch, just for entertainment purposes and interaction purposes, then I think as long as it's standalone, free of wires, and it's pretty lightweight, I think people will use them for extended periods of time. I mean, look, you're wearing these cans, right? These headphones, not your iPods right now. And Yvonne and I are using just our speakers and mics on our tablets, but it's personal choice, right? I do have the fancy headset with the boom mic, but after 2 years of doing these Zoom calls, I'm back to just talking through the speaker mic that's integrated.
So now this gets interesting, because we go back to the definition from the beginning. If the metaverse is this continuum of different, let's say, things with the 3D overlay, as we said, right? And maybe next evolution, it kind of exists like internet exists even when we are not using it, right? And it's kind of your choice, and I completely agree there with Doug. I said we need to have some device, but it's your choice, like depending on what you want to experience and what you want to try. You'll probably need sort of as Doug said, different device. If you kind of completely want yourself to isolate from your environment, have a visual and audio and completely immersive experience, you'll probably need a sort of one device, right? And I agree with you, Tim. I think there is even research kind of it's too tiring to do it more than 2 hours a day cumulatively. I read somewhere like, biology behind it. I think, if you want to kind of, as Doug said, see something in augmented reality quickly that will add information or experience, you might need the goggles on the street. And, the third thing is like, so all I'm trying to say, I think it'll be kind of continuum, and depending on the use case or what you want to experience, you'll need to sort of use different things to assess it, to access the environment. And probably, there'll be like just as Doug said, I could have a HD camera now and you see me, but I could also work with the lower resolution from my computer and you still see me, but it's not as good as of an experience. So probably, we'll have different devices to experience this. Now, not to go around your question, I'm going back to this biological research. I think this is kind of the most immersive experience that takes you all. It's probably for kind of high intensity, but like limited period, things like gaming or etc. And then there might be other kind of usages that require different types of devices that are not so, let's say, brain consuming in a way.
Okay. To get back to something you both touched on earlier, to what extent does the metaverse have to be a grand kind of unified destination or concept? There's a lot of talk at the moment that what we're seeing in the market are sort of proto metaverses. So Roblox is one, and Horizon Worlds is another, and so on. But there's some people sort of talk about the fact that there needs to be some kind of integration between them, so that if you're in one metaverse, you might be able to carry your digital assets over into a different one. It seems like a long way off, but do you think that that's necessary for the definition, or do you think it's achievable? So Doug, what do you think?
Well, going back to our original definitions, right? It's just the next step in the internet. So today, the internet is not just one place. Of course, it's all IP interconnected and routed, and all of the plumbing that creates the internet. But in terms of interaction spaces and places and places you go to shop and interact, search and play, they're all disparate communities today. And you have some big giant ones like Facebook and Instagram and some of the other social media sites. But I think that in the metaverse, it's going to be similar, right? You have these different spaces. We talked about place. One of the definitions that Ivan talked about, it's a place, right? So it's not a single place. It could be different places. They may or may not be interconnected. But your point about digital assets is interesting because, you have an avatar, you have things that you might accumulate in different gaming platforms or in e-commerce platforms and other things that you might want to take with you. And if you think about the internet today, you have things like for e-commerce, you have Shopify, for example, that makes it a lot easier for you to check out in different e-commerce platforms. So if you're shopping in different places in the internet, it makes it very easy. There's the question of identity. So you might want to have an avatar with a bunch of attributes, maybe some NFT type things around it, but you want to use that in different metaverse spaces. So, that maybe there will be third parties like there are today in the internet that will authenticate you in terms of your identity, allow you to store some of these digital assets, including your own avatar and the characteristics about you, and make them portable across different platforms. So that's something you can envision happening. But I don't think, certainly it's not that way today, where it's going to be one grand, giant, unified metaverse, right? It's going to be a collection of places, of spaces, of interactive experiences. So I think it brings up the question of how do you, as you said, bring these digital assets from one place to another. So
Tim, I kind of put my chief business officer hat here, and I have to say, it's kind of little bit difficult to predict technology because we are at the early stage and it'll depend on many things like ecosystems and so forth, how it will play out. But I think ultimately there'll be two factors. So one, I always put like people, person, or customer at the center. So like, what's the customer experience that we'll provide? And the second sort of vector is the business model. And so I'll explain in a second. For me as a customer, it is actually better if these worlds are connected, because I don't need to kind of 5 times put my credit card in. I can move my identities. I can, have assets that I bought in one world if they are usable in the other. So the question for me is only how strong is that impetus? So push or pull from a customer back for these worlds to be connected. If it's today, I have 3 video games, maybe in 3 different, let's say, places. Maybe it's not so important, right? There is not like existential need. So the pull will not be strong, but maybe in the future, when shops are there and so forth, actually the customers or consumers will demand that. So that's one factor. The second factor is actually the business model, because if you get one dominant player that goes and captures like a platform play, a lot of users start building within that platform many worlds. It'll kind of collapse all of these other rules that are mushrooming, and everybody will want to jump on that platform. So there'll be like a big bubble, and there'll be some small niche applications that might not be connected. However, if you have multiple players pushing where everybody starts, building their own worlds, you kind of get into this equilibrium where then everybody realizes there's no point of competing. We'll create more surplus or more business value if we are connected, and then you all of a sudden have an ecosystem, and then there is a competition of experience services and so forth that they provide in that kind of overall connected ecosystem. So I would say these are 2 dimensions to think about it. So if there is a strong pull from a consumer and sort of multiple players kind of competing, we'll probably have much more of a connected worlds. And there, you can draw it almost as a matrix with a couple of outcomes. I can't fully predict. I believe it's going to be connected worlds and will evolve to something that's kind of next evolution of internet. But as I said, it's kind of a little bit ungrateful to predict, but I would think about these 2 dimensions if you ask me personally.
Well, it's interesting, where you're going with that argument, Ivan, because obviously there was this sort of utopian sense around the original internet, which was it's going to be sort of free for everybody and everyone's going to be sharing. And then I think probably about 5 or 10 years ago, Chris Anderson, who's one of the big thinkers on digital thinkers of the era, he wrote an article for Wired saying it's the end, the internet is over or something. And his argument was that the internet doesn't really exist because it's just Twitter and Facebook and YouTube and Amazon, and the vast majority of activity takes place on those platforms because, as you said, Ivan, it's so much easier for end users to sort of use those tools and share and talk to other people on those platforms than it is on 1,000,001 independent blog platforms or whatever. So I wonder if the metaverse will go the same way, and it'll be dominated by a bunch of big corporations that just simply make it easy for people to navigate around these virtual spaces and share and interoperate with each other. So, Doug, what do you think about that?
Well, I think it's, again, we're talking about next step in the internet. So what history has shown is that it's all about scale, critical mass, and the network effect, right? So all the giants that you named, the FANGs plus, right? They achieved the scale, the critical mass, and they did it because they offered to, going back to what Ivan talked about, is being business centric and satisfying consumers in terms of commerce needs or entertainment play type needs, but they may not last forever, right? I mean, there are a lot of challengers now to Amazon, both in the e-commerce and the cloud business. Everyone talks about Facebook, but then all of a sudden Snapchat came up, and then TikTok, and but what we see happening time and time again in the internet is this network effect, right? So you don't have hundreds or thousands competing over the same space, right? It's dozens, and then down to 3, and then 1. So And in
Yeah.
terms of the user experience, it's quite good, right? Because if you want to shop, you just go on Amazon. If you want to, post something, you go to the 1 or 3 social networks that you use today. Messaging, is kind of a mess right now, too many of them, but you can get it done. So, I don't know. It's hard to predict. I think, I'll agree with Yvonne here. You can't predict what's going to happen.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, whether it's, disparate hundreds or thousands of interconnected communities or, huge behemoths around these critical mass entities, I think it's going to be important to keep the user experience in mind and be able to easily move to and fro, the different spaces and bring your identity, bring your digital assets, and just have a more seamless user experience.
I mean, one of the if we continue with that sort of line of reasoning and argument, there's a lot of talk about Web 3.0 and how that's going to enable whatever dominant platforms there are on the metaverse to be more democratic and to allow people more control over their data and their avatars and their assets. So first of all, Yvonne, I don't know if you can define Web 3.0. I'm handing that one over to you. But if also, how closely linked are these two subjects?
Well, as usual, I used to work in my prior life a lot around tech trends. So a lot of these tech trends are, of course, connected. So Web 3.0 is connected. But I mean, just for definitions, so for people who don't know it, I mean, Web 3 is an idea for, next version of World Wide Web based on blockchain technology, which kind of integrates concepts as decentralization, token-based economics, and others. And so, I think, especially given what we see, happening in Metaverse, around like NFTs and buying different digital assets now in Metaverse, and even some eminent companies like Nike and so forth selling like assets, their digital assets. I think they're definitely very connected. And if we see sort of Metaverse as kind of an overlay or extension or evolution of the internet, then a lot of these technologies will morph one into another. And I'm hoping, based also linking to your previous question, that this will become like the World Wide Web is today. We have a continuum, and then different people have, or different companies have their spaces there, and that's how they compete for consumers. But we as a customer or consumer have kind of, or our customers or consumers, they have kind of uninterrupted experiences across these. So I think that would kind of be my answer to that. A little bit very futuristic question, but I like it. So maybe Doug has also some thoughts on this.
Well, I've heard about Web 3.0 and I've heard that it's coming. So that's about it. No, seriously, I mean, I think there are a lot of critics out there that how revolutionary it's really going to be as a next generation internet platform. But certainly all the things that we're talking about in the metaverse are going to require evolution in the underlying internet technology and plumbing, as it were. So, beyond that, I really don't have much comment on whether it's what it's going to bring and what's going to materialize based on it. I think the main topic here, talking about the metaverse itself, is really on point, and whether it's Web 3.0 or other technologies that will help to launch it and make it real, I think that's not so relevant.
Well, it's I think what you guys have just been talking about for the last 15 minutes tells us that whatever happens, whatever direction the metaverse goes in, it will be dominated by a small number of dominant players, because history just shows that is what always happens. It happened in the PC era, it happened in the early days of the desktop internet, it happened in the mobile internet, and so I'm sure that that's the way it will go. And whatever the underlying infrastructure is, the sort of user interface will be dominated by a number of platforms. As you said, though, well, it might not necessarily be the same ones as now, but there certainly will be a small number. That's my opinion anyway. But anyway, to get back to the end of your last point, Doug, what are the main sort of infrastructural challenges? Obviously, if we're talking about a richly immersive 3D real-time world, then that's a lot of computing power and a lot of low latency needed for that. So is 5G the answer? Can Wi-Fi handle this? Is there any other kind of mesh networking involved needed, or what are your thoughts on the sort of underlying technology here?
Well, certainly connectivity is very important. So, higher speed Wi-Fi, higher speed cellular, talking about 5G is very important, right? But as you mentioned, to run the metaverse, you need a lot of compute power. And the more that's done in the cloud, the better off we are, because if you think about these very, very lightweight, not the HMDs, not the VR goggles, but just the glasses, right? There's not a lot of real estate for batteries and electronics there. So they have to be extremely lightweight. You have to move the computing off the device and into the cloud, and you have to move that computing power closer to the edge of the network as well. So if you think about what's happening in 5G, 5G is giving you the high bandwidth that's required and the low latency, but there's this concept called the telco edge cloud, or multi-access edge computing. And the big hyperscalers are involved with this, large operators, sometimes they're building their own. But the important point is that this required computing power is moving closer to the edge of the network. And that's very important because you want to scale very quickly in a particular region or area where there might be huge demand, sudden demand. And then you need to have that compute power be very, very close to the user. And that, again, you have the high bandwidth of 5G and the very low latency. That doesn't help you if you're talking to an AWS instance that's across the country and you have huge latency. So if you can move that compute power to the edge of the network, that's going to help tremendously. And people that are at home or in the office on a broadband fiber connection with very low latency, they have the connectivity that's required. But as I mentioned earlier, more and more people, the vast majority, especially young people, experience the internet now through a mobile device. So you need to have that mobility, and you need to have 5G networks that provide this higher bandwidth and lower latency and the cloud edge computing.
Yvonne, any thoughts on that?
Well, I don't want to repeat what Doug said. So he addressed the hard tech problem to an extent. I also think, we'll need to think about like new methods when it comes to kind of more digital technologies. So because I was kind of also kept thinking, okay, we had VR before, what's different and so forth. But I mean, there are a couple of differences. So one is on the hard tech side, what Doug addressed, and also, GPUs and so forth. But then there is another one. There is another thing is like, how do we kind of rapidly build, these metaverse experiences? Because I mean, just for one project, using conventional methods, right? Just programming and design and so forth. They calculated to build one world. Somebody told me it would take them like 70,000 man hours in a way. So actually development of artificial intelligence, then some of these kind of video methods like photorealistic 3D engines, volumetric videos, things that like automate production, and then as we build assets and tools will be, that's also going to be a bottleneck if we don't solve it. So those would be the kind of solution. And also, with development of kind of software 2.0, like low code, et cetera, we might accelerate also on the software side. So it's kind of a complement to what Doug was saying. So I actually completely agree on that. Plus, we'll need this if we are to kind of churn these experiences rapidly. And then once we have certain base of tools or assets or libraries like you have today, then everything will get a little bit into exponential motion. That's why I also expect at the beginning, we'll have the hype cycle, like a lot of expectations, but we won't be able to satisfy the demand so fast until we have all the tools in place, but then it'll jump. So I think these two will go in parallel, like hardware and the software part.
Yeah, and I agree. AI is going to be a very important component to building out the metaverse, because like Ivan just mentioned, the number of man hours to create a virtual world, right? So if you have an AI contributing, helping, that's going to accelerate that. But I think good old human grit, right? So crowdsourcing is going to be another important method, right? So you have companies that are building tools. You don't need to be a programmer or a coder to help build a virtual environment. And just like today, if you think about all these social media platforms, you think about Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok, where does all that content come from? Like these FANG companies don't build the content; they just build the platform, and we're contributing all of the content that they're monetizing, right? So if there's a business impetus, going back to what Ivan mentioned, that we'll find ways to build it out quickly, even if it's the users themselves helping to build it out.
Yeah, I mean, interesting what you said there, because that brings us back to the whole topic around the oligarchy that will dominate this and the business models. Because if users get more aware of the fact that they're doing all the work and the platforms are getting the rewards, then that's another driver towards this possible decentralized blockchain-based metaverse. And viewers should check out some of the experiments that are already going on in terms of returning some power and sovereignty back to the people on these proto-metaverses. So there's the Sandbox and Decentralised. So some of these sort of early experiments. But back to the technology, we did have a question from Giorgio Giapponi about some of these technical questions. So I hope that we answered some of your queries, Giorgio, with that last answer. So sort of moving on to more sort of MEF, core MEF areas now. We have talked a little bit about commerce, but maybe we can talk about the experience of what that actually might look like for a customer. Doug, I know that you have this audience platform, which is a sort of first kind of, inching towards what this might look like. So maybe you could describe for the viewers what it is and how it might give us some kind of early indication of where the future might lead us.
Sure, thanks, Tim. So at Summertech, we've developed this audience platform. It's a platform as a service. It's a completely immersive 360 live streaming platform. It delivers a very high quality interactive event experience to virtual audiences. So again, that sounds metaverse-y, VRE, but it's completely e-commerce enabled, and it's two-way interactive as well. So what we're doing here is kind of proto metaverse in a Zoom call, and what people do with live stream shopping events today is typically linear 2D one way. Very early days for streaming technology. So what we're trying to do is take it to the next level, and introducing, first of all, full immersive experience. So it's full 360 VR, and it combines the interactivity, so two-way communication. So that's another element of the metaverse, is interactivity and communication, and then e-commerce. So completely e-commerce enabled means that you have chatbots, you have QR codes that allow you to explore products that, in terms of product placement, if it's a shopping type stream, then of course, you have products that you want to potentially add to your cart and check out. So it's a complete platform. And, I think this is getting to one of the key questions about what is the metaverse going to be useful for, right? What are we going to use it for? Is it just entertainment and interactivity and gaming, and or can we talk about how it's going to evolve commerce? And I believe that the metaverse, again, promises to transform society and businesses as we know it. I mean, how many times has the internet or the web transformed society and or business? But some estimate that the total economy in the metaverse will be larger than the physical world. And we're already taking some small steps into this virtual world. So I think now it's time to talk about that commerce and how do we monetize. And through the pandemic of 2 years, we've seen how going virtual can really boost productivity, increase revenues and profitability. We've seen how we can maintain productivity in the enterprise through video conferencing, web meetings. We have content streaming, omni-channel messaging, AI chatbots. I mean, all of these, this whole digital transformation was accelerated by 10+ years, right? In 2 short years. And it's enabled businesses to remain productive and increase profitability. It's enabled brick and mortar stores, small mom and pop shops and SMBs to go from brick and mortar to click and mortar. And the whole huge swaths of population learned what QR codes is and what you can do with the online shopping in terms of either delivery or store pickup, getting food delivered. So there's been this acceleration, and I think the metaverse is going to take that one step further.
So just to make it more vivid for people, can you, I know you've done some actual trials and live experiments with this platform. So like, for example, we were talking offline a couple of weeks ago about you did a sort of an event with a jazz singer in Canada. So, and I presume she was selling stuff on that call. So maybe you could just briefly talk about how that process might work, like, for example, in a Facebook Live scenario, and how it works with your platform from a user's point of view.
Well, if you think about going live on Facebook or Instagram, it's pretty much a one-way stream. Okay, you have a little bit of interaction with some emojis and some chat messages going back, but there's no two-way communication. There's no e-commerce embedded, and it's a 2D stream, right? You don't have an immersive experience in a 3D environment. So, what we did with Stacey Ryan, who is an up-and-coming singer-songwriter in Canada, really recently blew up on TikTok with millions of followers, and and she's since then gotten a record contract and started producing commercial music. It's really taken off. But we invited her out to our studio in Montreal, and we did we called it a jam and amma. So it was a jam session, music session, as well as it's a live performance, but an Ask Me Anything. And the format with Ask Me Anything, instead of what you see on Instagram, where you post one story, say, hey, ask me anything, and there's a text box, and the next stories, you just fill in the blanks of answering the questions, and maybe you put a picture or a video behind it. This was real time. This was live. So there was a live performance. The Ask Me Anything was, people that were participants being able to call in, doing a real live video call. We could put them up on a video wall, and so they can see themselves live on the video wall. We have this concept called the front row, where you have a tablet that's right in front of like an iPad that's right in front of the performer, and you can have a one-on-one interaction with the performer. So they Ask Me Anything part of the show, people were actually directly like on a FaceTime, a video call with Stacey, asking the question. So it was much more interactive. And then in terms of commerce, it was a live event. So typically in music events, you have merchandise, right? T-shirts and other souvenirs. So we have these QR codes where you can click on it live in the event. You just long press on the screen on the QR code, and the chatbot and shopping e-commerce chatbot popped up with a T-shirt and other collectibles, and another QR code that had a link directly to her Patreon account, so you can contribute. So that's just one small example of a live event that we did.
And Ivan, the kind of things that Doug's talking about there are obviously going to be very interesting to a company like Infobit, because he's referencing chatbots and communication streams and payment channels and all the stuff that you guys are into. So what are your thoughts on the way that these kind of lines of communication and payment channels might evolve?
Okay, this is a great question. So I think, we are really on a mission to democratize communication. So that means, we take complex infrastructure, sometimes extremely complex, and, we make it very simple with people to use using different APIs. So, we bring communication wherever you are. You can use messages, digital messages, email, and more complex solutions like chatbot, but all through a simple API and make it available to everyone. So given that mission, right, I think, we started believing a little bit about in something we call total experience. So that the future is not about downloading yet another app, but actually that we can bring all the communication with your own preferences and with your own personalizations wherever you are. And we're actually slowly working toward that aim. So today, in WhatsApp, we can build end-to-end customer journey using our chatbot, some automation solution, and so forth. And I think once Metaverse gets into full swing, I think we want to be there to provide that total experience there as well. So like exactly Doug was describing, we'll help companies like Doug's to close end-to-end customer journey. So, you need a confirmation that your shirt is on the way. You need a QR code, you need a communication. So I think companies like ours, this is our intentions, will definitely want to bring all that suite in a same simple way also to the Metaverse. So that's why this is kind of important. And we are conceptualizing to start, experimenting in this proto metaverses. How would that look like? But then eventually, we do want actually to create this continuum in communication and also in personalization across all the channels where customers or users or people can be. So whether it's a WhatsApp, whether it's another channel or it's a Metaverse, if we through our APIs and customer data platform and so forth can transmit that's actually a huge gain. So it's our aspiration to create that total experience. And I think it's an interesting thing. And I think a lot of companies, including telcos, us and so forth, will have a role to play to help close that customer journey.
Have you, how much do you think that how important might messaging be in the evolution of this, of the Metaverse? Clearly, it's that very, you keep saying you can't really predict the future. Obviously, this is all just a fun conversation and we're just guessing, but at the beginning of the digital commerce revolution, I don't think anyone would have really thought about how important SMS one-time passcodes would be to making everything work. So messaging really is quite an important part of the digital economy. So have you given any thought to sort of what role it might play in a more immersive 3D world?
Yes. Go ahead, Doug, please. No, please.
So I was thinking that, you just mentioned SMS one-time passwords, but that's really more about identity, right, than messaging. But I do believe, though, that messaging in these new virtual worlds is going to be paramount. It is a key component of the metaverse. We talked about earlier in our definitions that interaction, that human interaction is very key. And part about making something immersive and a rich interaction in terms of a human co-experience obviously is communication. So messaging in terms of text messaging is going to still be very important. Obviously live, real-time communications in terms of voice and video is important as well. But if you think about the first metaverse, right, telecom arguably was the first metaverse, and we evolved from phones, phone calls, pagers, mobile messaging, video to VR. But still a lot of our messaging today is through these chat apps. It's text, it's messaging. And then now we're talking about rich business messaging, A2P. So all of that is just going to move from internet, I don't know what version you want to call it, 4.0, 5.0, into the next generation, which is this, we're talking about the metaverse. So, within AR and VR, two-way communications will continue to play a huge role. And this will include messaging and both person-to-person and business messaging and chatbots. I mentioned our audience platform to enable e-commerce. We have chatbots, right? So you can imagine if you have the VR goggles on, or if you're on your smartphone and you're enjoying the 360 event, but you see something you like, you want to click on that QR code, it pops up a little chatbot window to add it to your cart. And it's not simply adding to your cart. The chatbot, the AI chatbot is there to interact with, to understand, maybe it's as simple as what size do you want, but there could be a bunch of other questions than that you're chatting back and forth to the chatbot. And the good thing about our platform, it's actually based on industry standards. So we use RCS, we use IMS, it's omni-channel capable. So, for example, if we wanted to plug in with InfoBip and use the conversational APIs, we can just plug in. And any other aggregator or other platform that provides like an e-commerce checkout experience, right, for payments. All these things can just be plugged in. And that's one way of, bridging the gap in terms of these disparate, metaverse spaces.
I think Tim, Doug explained it like he would be working for him, but it's great. Like you do believe it will exist. I think the fundamental question for us, it's going to be omni-channel, and we're going to build on it. And as if you believe on what I was saying in total experience, it might even play kind of that more important role if you have your own kind of data pack that connects the memory of what your preferences are and so forth. Now, the other question that you didn't raise, sorry, I will build so that I don't repeat, because I agree completely with Doug, is actually what's going to be our identity. Because today our identity is like a phone number, because there is a telco company that checked our things, and when you send a message to that phone number, you can cross-match it with the person and so forth. And maybe it's our, sort of Google account and Apple account, and you can send an email or you can send a message to your Apple ID. Now, within Metaverse, are we going to kind of join this, and there will be one like digital identity that includes that? And will the phone numbers exist? Those are kind of more interesting question, because if there's no phone number, then SMS will go down, but messaging as a modality will survive. It's just going to be a matter of technicality and in a way, what are trusted institutions to verify our identity in a way. And that's kind of a bit, a big question, not like in the next year or 2 or 3, but like down the road, how will messaging evolve? But definitely it'll remain in a way.
This may seem like a really kind of stupid, like idiot's question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So, we have a world at the moment where we're online and maybe we're buying something, or we're on a social media platform and we want to type a message in. We do it on the keyboard, on the physical keyboard. If we're in the metaverse, whether it's a headset type metaverse or something a little bit more like an overlay of real life, are we going to be typing onto virtual keyboards, or are we going to retain that physical element, but just see the results of what we're typing on a physical keyboard in the virtual space? I've often wondered about this question, and it seems like an embarrassing one to ask because it's so basic, but I wonder if you have any thoughts on that, Ivan.
It's a great question. Actually, I don't think it's a stupid question at all. Look, I think there are kind of two trends, and so let's answer the question straight. I actually would think there will be some sort of probably. As I said, I like devices, so it's a matter of personal preferences. But I think for me, for example, and some number of people, you would still like to have a physical device, even if you see what you're doing in a virtual world. So I think that won't disappear to now. I just want to kind of say there are other modalities. So today we have a kind of a text to speech. It's just a matter of convenience and speed. And then it's not that fast as probably is when you type, or not as accurate. If that improves, that might take some number of users away. And then actually on many of platforms, you have kind of applied artificial intelligence now that help predict what will you type. So now when you go to your email editor in Google, it'll kind of fill and you'll just click the words. LinkedIn is doing the same. These engines will become more and more proficient, so it will make you faster. So, I think physical and virtual inputs and text to speech, those will be 3 modalities of inputs, but they'll be kind of turbo boosted by these technologies. So you actually won't have such a big need for typing a lot. It'll kind of, you see what I mean? You will have common answers. You just click So that will also facilitate interaction in Metaverse. And that's an interesting technology to look in because it'll reduce the burden for the one who's inputting and like automate how the inputs are being created. But definitely some aspect of typing will probably stay. You need to give an input still. And I don't think the long future will have this brain device interfaces where you can kind of it can read your mind, but like we'll need to give input somehow. And I see these three, like virtual, physical, definitely for number of user, and then text to speech, then augmented by AI.
Yeah, I think user input, that's a good question here, because a lot of people, when they see these VR goggles, they just see the goggles. They don't see that you have controllers too. And a lot of gamers are used to using controllers, right, for their console-based games, or these, one-hand, two-handed controllers for VR. So there is, the potential for input using these controller devices. It's really hard to type a lot of text. So probably speech to text is going to be, one answer for long messages. But for command and control, these controllers are actually quite good. I don't know if you've ever experienced them. But, I will remind everybody that, and maybe people in the audience are too young to remember this, but, when you had a feature phone, the candy bar phone, and you had to go from, a physical keyboard on your laptop or your computer to typing messages on your candy bar phone, we use this triple tap, right? You remember triple tap? And people got very proficient at that with one finger or two fingers. And then, of course, the Holy Grail, the BlackBerry, came out, and everybody bemoaned the loss of the physical keyboard when the iPhone came out. And now everyone's tapping happily on a piece of glass, right, with no tactile feedback, and they're using just their thumbs or swiping, and more are hitting that microphone button and sending voice clips, or voice recognition in terms of speech to text. So, I think there will always be a need to control the user interface, but that can be done with gestures and with these controllers, with speech commands, and then for typing very long messages, it'll probably be voice clips or speech to text AI, and for shorter messages, there'll be something similar to what we do today, whether it's a virtual keyboard suspended in the air or using controllers, or maybe you have a small little device that you have the glasses or the goggles on, but you can sit down and use a Bluetooth connected keyboard or something like that.
I mean, it's very hard to imagine the mass market embracing those kinds of behaviors. But then you would have said the same about,
triple tap,
e-commerce and triple tap, and that's just requires a leap of faith. We've got 5 minutes left, so I'm gonna ask the last question now, and it's a tricky one. And when we were talking about messaging earlier, Doug rightly pointed out that one-time passwords are more about the question of identity than they are about messaging. So can you just give me your thoughts on how digital identity might evolve in this space? It's obviously a very, very challenging issue right now, with all the worries about identity theft and the sort of clunkiness of the way that we identify ourselves online at the moment. So obviously that needs a lot of work. But in the virtual world, when everyone has an avatar and they want to move their avatar possibly from one place to another, but they want to stay anonymous, it's becoming even more of a complex issue. So we've got about 4 minutes to answer that one, but any quick thoughts on that from you, Doug?
I think we talked about it a lot through the conversation here, but I'll just go back to, I think it's really important to have some kind of identity repository where it's, it can verify you, so it's verification, but also has all of your preferences, your KYC information, digital assets, whether you want to be spammed or not, whether you want to be anonymous or not, what degree of sharing, all these things, right? And maybe they can be preset for different platforms, but I think that's important. Today we use one-time passwords to a cell phone or to an email because it satisfies the two-factor or something something you have principles, right? But so you'll need to have some way of identifying and verifying who you are. But I think we can hopefully have a much richer and complete, maybe we'll call it a metaverse passport.
Yeah, I'll jump on it, Tim, because we don't have much time. So I mean, look, I mean, I think today you have your physical identity, which is, you know, where you live, your, as Doug said, mentioned, word passport, you know, certain documents and you know, your biometrics and so forth. And then you have actually online identity that's much more, let's say, than a password. It's your virtual address, your email, your domain name, your behaviors on the web that some companies collect, and you know, search history and different things. And I think that that'll just become more blurred and more expanded in the metaverse, because, you know, some of the biometrics will be collected in metaverse, and even your reactions to certain stimuli, like, you know, how your eyes are reacting to some commercials, or, you know, in healthcare, like whether your cognitive, you know, state remains the same over time. It'll kind of reflect interactions that you have in the digital world with people, but because metaverse also includes augmented reality, it'll take aspects to your physical identity. So it'll become very complex, that it does call for A, high data protection, and B, something like, I will end up with alignment with Doug, something like digital password that sort of has to be shielded, and where you can choose like what you disclose and what you don't, because actually it's going even more into your privacy in a way. And I think I think it'll be, we need to be cautious on that, but in principle it will require something like a digital passport that has some facets that identify you, that are multi-layered, from biometrics to, you know, like you mentioned, messaging and different things, and then, you know, some sort of a system that protects your data, because it's actually, you can infer a lot by even just like, you know, reading stimuli, reading responses of your eyes on a stimuli, for example, that you give through metaverse. So that's actually pretty big question for a short time, but I think to end up and round it, I think that something like a digital password that protects this data and allow you to share with whom you want, and a protection system will need to have.
Well, that's a nice summary, and obviously there's a certain amount of tension there, as you say. I mean, it gives us the opportunity to get better at digital identity, because there's all the extra elements around the biometrics and the eye movements and so on, but it also, that opens up, you know, more threats, more fraud, more dangers of surveillance and so on. So it's a fascinating topic. The whole thing is fascinating, and Doug and Ivan, thank you very, very much for amazing insights. This hour has flown by. Really, really enjoyable topic, and I'm sure we'll return to it again soon. And please look out for the report, which I'm trying to finish now, and we'll be ready in a couple of weeks, I hope. So, Doug, Ivan, thank you so much for your time, and thanks for watching. Bye, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye.